Hi everyone, so today I'm looking at the Skywatcher EvoStar 100mm ED refractor. For anyone who's in the market for a 4-inch refractor, this is one scope that is worth considering. For one thing, it uses FBL 53 glass, which means that the color correction that it offers is very good. And second, for anyone who's primarily looking for a visual instrument, the longer f9 focal ratio makes it easier on the eyepieces and also allows you to get fairly high magnifications without going with very expensive or very short focal length eyepieces. I've spent quite a bit of time testing the optics on this scope from my backyard, and I find the views on the moon to be very good. The contrast is very high. You can see a lot of detail in the craters because of the fairly decent 4-inch aperture on this scope compared to a 3-inch scope at least. And I did find that I got good views of the planets. I tested it on Mars and Jupiter, and also the deep sky objects look quite good. But what I found particularly interesting about this scope was its performance on double stars. Now, it did a great job of separating a lot of the doubles up there in the sky. The 4-inch aperture definitely offered a good bit of extra reach compared to the 3-inch scopes that I tried previously, and I was easily able to split some of the stars that my 3-inch refractors had trouble with in the past. And being a doublet ED refractor, meaning that it uses 2 pieces of glass for the objective in the front instead of 3 different pieces to correct the color, one of the advantages of this design is that it is quite a bit lighter than some of those triplet designs, so it cools a lot faster, and the scope is also a lot lighter and more compact. Now, even though it performs very well for visual, one thing I found when trying to image with this scope is that at f9 it was a little bit slower than I liked for imaging, and I had to use longer exposures to be able to capture the same amount of detail as I could with a faster scope. And since this scope is not really made for imaging, unlike the newer Esprit series from Skywatcher, the EvoStar series is, although quite well corrected, it doesn't give you sharp stars to the edge of the field on a full frame sensor. And here are some of the tests that I had done with a Canon 6D Mark I to show you what the stars look like at the edge. Now, because of the slow f9 focal ratio, they look pretty decent. However, if you are planning to do astrophotography with a telescope like this, I do recommend getting a focal reducer or field flattener. And Skywatcher does have their own 0.85x focal reducer for this telescope, which should be able to correct the stars all the way to the edge of a full frame sensor. Now, with an APS-C sensor, you don't need a field flattener because the field is flat enough for that. Or if you're using an astro camera with a micro four thirds sensor, such as the ASI 294 or the ASI 1600, you likely will not even need a focal reducer. But again, f9 is a bit slow for imaging if you're doing any kind of serious imaging. Mechanically, the scope is quite well made. I have no complaints about the build quality of this scope. There's a non-retractable dew shield, which does make it a little bit longer than it could be with a retractable dew shield, but I've not had any issues with that. The focuser on this scope, I find it to be quite good, even with my heavier eyepieces. One of the common complaints I've seen online is that if you're using really heavy eyepieces, such as this one, the focuser can slide out because it's not able to hold those eyepieces up. But I've noticed that on a lot of the cheaper Crayford focusers, and that's an easy adjustment. In the description of this video below, I've put a link from Telescope Austria, which gives you instructions on how to adjust the tension using these screws at the bottom over here. It uses a combination of 2mm and 2.5mm hex screws, and it shouldn't take you more than a couple of minutes to adjust the tension in the focuser, and after that you'll have absolutely no problem holding up heavier eyepieces. I have used my 20mm 100-degree eyepieces in this scope as well, and the focuser handles them no problem, and it had no problem handling my Canon 6D for astro imaging as well. In terms of accessories that the scope comes with, it comes with a small green green dovetail, which I ended up replacing with these two larger black ones so that I can hook up an auto guider or a dew heater or other accessories to them, and it also makes it a little bit easier to balance. The scope originally came with a 90-degree 50mm finder, but I prefer straight through finders, so I ended up switching it out, but most people do prefer that 90-degree finder that it normally comes with. It comes with two of the Skywatcher eyepieces included, and of course I have my own set of eyepieces, so I ended up replacing them with my larger 2-inch 100-degree field of view eyepieces that I use in all my scopes for visual. Also, it comes with this very nice large aluminum case to store everything. And there is also the 2-inch dielectric diagonal that it comes with that can take 2-inch or 1.25-inch eyepieces with the included 1.25-inch adapter. So I compared this refractor to some of my other telescopes, particularly the 8-inch f6 Skywatcher reflector telescope, as well as my Celestron C8. And the main advantage of a scope like this was that it did offer a wider field of view than either of the other telescopes, and also it cooled down a lot faster, so it was ready for visual observing, within about half an hour versus about an hour for the other two telescopes, considering the large temperature difference between inside and outside where I live. And also the view through the refractor offered nearly pinpoint stars all the way to the edge of even my largest eyepieces, something that my 8-inch f6 Dob and my f10 C8 could not do. But again, it can't quite match the light gathering ability of the 8-inch f6 reflector or the C8. And if you're looking at the moon or the planets in really high magnification on a night of good seeing, then I find that the larger telescopes definitely have a fairly decent advantage. I found that above about 200 times the views in this telescope got a little bit dim. So with my 4.9mm eyepiece, this telescope with its 900mm focal length gives me 190 times magnification. And that's about the limit of what I like to stick with. Anything greater than that and the view gets a little bit dim, and then the larger 8-inch telescopes pull ahead at that point. So that has been my experience with visual observing with this telescope. But the views that it does offer are very, very clear and crisp. And especially for double stars, I do prefer the refractor over my other larger telescopes. In conclusion, I think that this refractor is a great entry point for anybody looking for a fairly large refractor without spending a ton of money. This goes for about $1,250 US, and that's about 1,700 Canadian dollars. So for a 4-inch refractor, I think this is one of the best values in the market for anybody who might be looking for one of these. So I would definitely recommend it for visual observing, not so much for any serious astrophotography, even though it's definitely capable of that. So with the diagonal, the finder, and an eyepiece, the scope weighs about 10 pounds. So the lightest mount that I would recommend for this is the Skywatcher EQM35 equatorial mount, if you want to go with an equatorial mount, or the Skywatcher AZ4 or any equivalent mount if you want to use it for on an Altaz mount for visual purposes. So if you are in the market for one of these telescopes, consider using one of the links in the description below that supports this channel at no additional cost to you. So thanks for watching, and clear skies!